Hey, this is Mike, Seder42 Vinyl, doing a video about one of my favorite genres. I've been wanting to do a video about this genre for a while. I've been into this genre for a while, but I also got really deep into it where I was finding a lot of more of the rarer bands, or just, specifically looking for bands in this genre. Over the past several years during COVID, during lockdown, I just started watching some videos of some people in the VC, Omaha Introvert specifically, and she showed a lot of a video, and she had showed videos in the past before, but she had a video about power pop, the subgenre of music, and she discussed a bunch of her favorite bands. And it's a genre that I've been into for a while. In the 90s, I've been listening to Matthew Sweet for a long time now, in the, from the early to mid 90s. And I always knew that I loved his music. And I had found other bands like that, in that genre, but I never really put together that was power pop, inspired by or from bands like Big Star, the Beatles, and stuff like that. Big Star is one of the bands I know that he's mentioned in interviews in the past, that he's mentioned that he's liked. So I just wanted to do a video of a bunch basically it's going to be power pop in 30 albums, kind of like a power pop starter, if you want to get into the genre, if you're interested in this type of music. Power pop genre itself, like the sound of it is very, it's inspired directly from the Beatles. So it's very melodic, lots of harmonies. But over the years, there's different kind of eras of it. So, the early days of the early 70s would be like the post-Beatles sound, which is bands that sound very similar to the Beatles. Bands like Badfinger, stuff like that, maybe even Flamin' Groovies, who are just basically writing Beatles songs in their style, but pretty much in the same style as the Beatles. Badfinger especially as well. Another band that wrote songs that were very reminiscent or almost identical to Beatles songs. A lot of people even thought they were the Beatles, like under a pseudonym or whatever. That's kind of where it started, where the sound kind of starts, and then it kind of turns into a little bit of a post-punk sound in the late 70s, where, it's taking a little bit of hard driving guitars, playing upbeat songs, still with the Beatlesque harmonies, and, little, nods here and there to Beatles songs and Beatles riffs and stuff like that, and even Beatles lyrics. Bands like, The Knack, a band called The Beat. There's Paul Collins and The Beat. There's several other bands in the 70s, The Shoes, even Cheap Trick, kind of sometimes, all get put into that category of power pop music. And then there is, in the 90s, there's another hit, and that's where kind of like Matthew Sweet comes in. He kind of had some really popular songs. Girlfriend did pretty well on MTV, and he was able to tour the US quite a bit, and the Girlfriend album did really good, and that's just one of the greatest albums ever made, in my opinion. It's probably in my top 10 all-time favorite albums. But yeah, bands like that in the 90s. There's Material Issue is another band that was around in the 90s that had a very heavy power pop influence. And then again in the 2000s, like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, bands like Fountains of Wayne, even Weezer, have power pop songs and influences from the Beatles and things like that. And it continues to today, to 2023. There are bands that are really just bringing back that jangly guitar, those harmonizing choruses, very, very memorable choruses that power pop is known for. So I'm just going to kind of go through power pop in 30 albums and just show you 30 of my albums that I think are just really emblematic of power pop and the different eras of it. And of course, like I said, it all starts here in 1963. This is the Beatles, Please Please Me. This album, of course, starts it all. This album not only influences power pop, but just influences like tons of people to start making music. And the Beatles were just massive. I mean, even if there were bands that were out at, that were peers of the Beatles, they weren't killing the charts like these guys were in the US and the UK. Yeah, these guys were just hugely influential, whether you like them or not. Their imprint on music, even today, is just undeniable. But on power pop specifically, the Beatles is where it starts. Another album that is this is post Beatles. So this is one of the first bands. This is Badfinger that was post Beatles. This is a album called Straight Up, and it came out on the Apple label even. So and like I said, this album in particular has a lot of songs on it that sound exactly like the Beatles. Like, I mean, you wouldn't, this album, I mean, you could, if you played this for a person who only ever heard the Beatles and told them, you know, do you think these are Beatles songs or not? They would probably say they are, because they really emulate the Beatles a lot on here. Really great stuff though. This is a great album, and it has those harmonies, it has great choruses, and it's really taken that Beatles influence and running with it.
I tell you I love you. I tell you no lie. I tell you I need you, and I want you by my side. You used to be cold and lonely. You came along with your smile.
Another album that came out, this came out in 1972. This is post-Beatles as well, and this is Big Star, #1 record. And this album, of course, is a huge album that influenced the power pop genre. And this is, you know, influenced alternative rock too, I think. You know, a lot of bands, you know, would take probably influence from these guys just as an alternative band, because these guys had no hits. Like, this album had no hits at all. It was a flop when it came out. That 70s Show, of course, took one of the songs on here for their intro to the show. So yeah, this is definitely power pop, at least some of the time. You know, maybe not all the songs on here are strictly power pop, but again, this is a band that influenced a ton of power pop bands later on. All right, another album that is a big influence of power pop and also was power pop is the Flamin' Groovies. This is Shake Some Action. And there's actually a book that I have called Shake Some Action, the greatest, or the 200 best power pop albums. And, you know, the name of the book is called Shake Some Action. So, and that's where they get the name from, is from this band. And this is kind of like, I guess, maybe it's because, you know, these guys came out in 1976, so this is like way past the Beatles. You know, this is like, you know, at least 6 to 7 years, well, 71, I guess, the Beatles, so about 5 years after the Beatles, you know, kind of broke up and were done. And these guys, you know, Shake Some Action is very Beatles-esque, and there's a lot of other songs on here that are very Beatles-esque, but in the Flamin' Groovies, you know, a little bit of their style, so definitely power pop.
Shake some action's what I need to let me bust out at full speed, and I'm sure that's all you need to make it all right.
And another early record, kind of, 1977, and this album, it kind of is a mix. It's Elvis Costello, My Aim Is True. This album is power pop, I think, in my opinion, and it's just not always power pop. You know, it has the new wave influence. It's alternative for the time, and yeah, it doesn't have like the harmonies and stuff, but it does have, at least not a lot, but it does have a lot of the jangly guitar and some of the very memorable choruses, and it just kind of has that feel, that kind of punky feel, you know, that post-punk feel of where power pop's going to go in the next couple years. So this may not be 100% a power pop album all the time, but it definitely influenced some of the albums that are coming up next. And like the biggest years for power pop are the years that right after this, 78, 79, 80, and even 81. Like those 3 or 4 years are very, that was like, there was a ton of power pop bands coming out in those years. So yeah, Elvis Costello kind of was like right before kind of like the explosion.
All of your family has to kill to survive, and they're still waiting for their big day to arrive. But if they do what I feel, they better be alive. Welcome to the working
This album came out in 1978. This is, again, just a little bit early, but Cheap Trick definitely has that Beatles influence. But again, I think Cheap Trick is part-time power pop, kind of, because they are not all, as far as a purist, like if you're like looking at, I'll talk about some of the power pop albums that are more generally, considered, I guess, pure power pop. But I think that Cheap Trick is, they're definitely part-time power poppers, because they definitely do, they're definitely a hard rock band. So they do like a lot of the FM rock, and they were definitely a hard rock band of the late 70s. But also, they do have some Beatles influence on here. They do some of the harmonies, but they also do some songs that are just, not power pop at all. So I think they dip their toe. Maybe they're like 50% power pop some of, the time, and the rest they're just kind of like a hard rock band. But still, when they're power pop, they go for it.
From a movie screen, he was taught she was wild at 15. Hated school and had no dreams, wasn't going very far. Then he got religion and she got a guy. It's on her back and it's in his job. It costs lots of money,
Here's another band that's also, I guess, this came out in 1978, and this is the Cars' first album. This album is, of course, it's power pop, yes, but it's also new wave. It has keyboards in it, so it's a little bit, it doesn't really have the jangly guitar at all, but it does have the harmonies, and it has the choruses. And power pop bands after this, especially power pop bands even in the 2000s, like Fountains of Wayne, they really crib from the Cars. Like there's songs where they directly take riffs and kind of like match them up with some guitar riffs in the Cars. So, huge influence on power pop. I consider this power pop, but I know that some people would just consider this like either hard rock or new wave or classic rock, whatever you would call that now. Yeah, but hugely influential on power pop, if anything, even though I do think it's power pop myself. All right, and this would be one of the first albums that came out in 1979. Now, I don't know when this came out specifically. This one, I don't have the specific date. I do know it came out in 79. And this is in the Shake Some Action Book 2.0. This is the #1 power pop album, and I would tend to agree. And it's one of my favorite albums of all time at this point. This is 2020. And Omaha Introvert talked about this band in one of her videos, and I just went out and bought it, and I got it. Actually, I actually got this locally, honestly. I found it at Hardy Boys one time, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I think I had this one and their second album. These are both demonstration albums, promos. And it has the little insert, for the promo for the band, which I thought was really cool. So yes, 2020, this is a pure 100% power pop album. This is influenced, I believe, by the Cars. The Cars influence these guys because they do have a little bit of the keyboards, and they do have a little bit of that sound, but the choruses are just as good as that Cars first album. This is one of the best debut albums ever, as well as the Cars first album, and this album is just fantastic. This is people who are into power pop know this album, but if you're not into power pop, this album is a must-have. I mean, it is that good. I think it is so good. Excellent album. Pure power pop. This might be the #1. I mean, this is the #1 power pop album in the Shake Some Action book, but I would agree with that myself.
once in this girl, and I wanted her so bad. Closing my eyes, and I thought I was going mad. Remember the night, and it felt so exciting. Remember the lightning. Remember the lightning. Picked up the phone, and I wanted to call her. I told her my friends that I can't live without her. Remember the night, and it felt so exciting. Remember the lightning. Remember the lightning.
This album used to be really hard to find. This is the Toms, and this was just reissued recently in 2023. And the guy who created this album, he's a huge Beatles fan, and he basically just made a record. He wrote a bunch of songs in the tone of the Beatles, and just put this album out. He self-financed it, I guess. and it was just put out on a record label, I guess Feel It Records, self-financed, and I don't think there was very many press of this originally, but he just did this reissue. You can get this on Bandcamp. I think he continues to repress it, so this should be available. This is a 2 LP release where it has the original album, the original songs, and then a whole other album with like, I think 10 or 12 more songs that were, you know, because he wrote like 20 or 30, you know, he wrote like 30 or 40 songs, I think he said, and then he just took the best ones and put them on the first album. But this comes out with a second album with additional tracks that he likes as well. So this is a really, really, really great release to have. The album cover is really plain, but excellent power pop here. Very, very Beatles-esque, and this came out in 1979 as well. I don't have the exact date. This one came out in May of 79, and this is the records. And this is the US press. There's a UK press. I forget the name of the album in the UK, but it had a different name and it had a different cover. But this is the one you're going to get if you get a US press. This album is excellent. This is just pure power pop. 100%. This is exactly, you know, what you would think if you were to put something in a power pop category, it'd be this album. There's no other subgenre that this album belongs in. It's in 2020 as well, the Toms as well. These are all just pure power pop records, and they are great. Another album you can get incredibly cheap, and I highly, highly recommend this album as well. All right, that's Power Pop in 30 albums, kind of like an intro. I hope you liked the video, and I hope this helps you find some bands. And if you are interested in the power pop genre, you may have some of these already, but maybe you were just like, oh, I didn't really know there was a lot of other bands that were like this stuff. And there's a ton. So yeah, if anybody has any suggestions for power pop bands that are really underground, unknown stuff, that's the stuff I'm looking for. You know, like the Straight Eight and stuff like that. Those were bands that I had no idea existed, and I was so happy to find that stuff because it's really, really, really good. All right, thanks for watching.